you again, Tom. It's lovely, as
Sure.
always, to see you.
Thank you.
We've had 2 episodes so far, and we've gone all around and through and over. A saying that keeps coming up for me is above as below, within as without. And I can't wait to hear more. I think we're going to look a little bit more at the angel aspects that you've experienced quite a lot of. I'm I'm fascinated by it all. So tell me more.
Well, I'm certainly not an expert. I mean, religious scholars have theorized that there's 10 levels of angels, and I can't even name all of them. The Dionysian scale that with seraphim being at the highest, principalities, thrones, etc., archangels. And I feel that I've, at various times in my life, have had brushes with them. I find the wheels very interesting. You know, they describe them as having four wings, the head of a man, the head of a lion, the head of a goat, the head of a bull, and 1,000 eyes. It's again metaphor to symbolize power. But um, again, as I'd mentioned in the previous episode, I think one of my first experiences was at the age of 3.5. And throughout my life, I have come across them. I firmly believe that on a daily basis, we are surrounded by angels and potentially beings from other dimensionality, other realms, call them etheric beings. I believe that beyond a shadow of a doubt. I think that angels are here with keeping their hand upon the pulse of humanity, if you will, trying to, in essence, report back to Creator. You know, are we evolving? Are we approaching each other with compassion? Are they progressing, or are we going the route of Sodom and Gomorrah?
Yeah.
Um, and uh, I have encountered angels as bright, effulgent light that comes in and out of form, not so much as you would think as a human being. And then I have encountered angels as human beings. Um, I, when I was involved in a healing circle in 1993, I had met a young woman. You know, I was a single guy, and I asked her out for a cup of coffee, and we were going to a local diner. I think it was a Denny's, for God's sakes, just to get a piece of cheap apple pie and a cup of coffee. And we're in there, or as we're walking in, I'm coming out of this healing circle, and there's all kinds of chi running through me. So, I mean, I'm just feeling like my chakras are opened up. I was hot, and I'm walking in, and the lady I was with, was kind of oblivious that there was another woman standing outside of the restaurant. And immediately I can see her, and it's cold, and she's wearing a t-shirt. She doesn't have a coat. And all of a sudden I'm feeling empathically, I said, congestive heart failure, pulmonary edema, uh, edema at her ankles, poor blood circulation, cancer, high white blood cell count. And I'm like, oh my God, uh, she's not long. And I want to stop, and I want to just hug her, um,
Yeah.
and uh, and run energy. So we go into the restaurant, and thankfully, this other woman appears a couple of minutes later, and she goes up to the counter, and she's sitting. Back then, they had the dining counter. She's sitting up at the counter on one of these seats, and she keeps dropping her napkin. And I just want to get up and rush over to pick up her napkin. And my date was kind of like, "Hey, here, eyes here, right here. Focus on me. You're here to get to know me." And so, if I were, say, for example, sitting across from you, and I'm here and you're in front of me,
Mm.
your back would be towards this woman that was over to the left. And so we're talking, the coffee comes, the pie comes, and all of a sudden there's this blast of gold light in the room. And I stop because this
It's
flash of
good.
light just happens.
Yeah.
And I'm looking, and there are these two 8 foot tall beings of gold light that are very human looking, but they are bright gold. And they're about 8 feet plus tall, and they're standing on both sides of her with their hands like this. And there are people, they're standing in the aisle of the restaurant. Here's the service counter on one side, and then there's cafe tables on the other. And people are walking back and forth. And as they would get close to the beings to these angels, they would inevitably just walk around them, as
Yeah.
if they could not see them, but their grace, the grace of these beings, had cleared a path.
Mm.
And I'm watching this and all of a sudden, one of the beings looks up like, there's a disturbance in the force. Someone knows we're here. And just looks to the right and just looks right at me and through me. And I was just felt like a little kid with his hand in the cookie jar. And I just telepathically said, "Are you from God?" Because I wanted to make sure. And they said, "Guys, yeah, we're from God. We're angels."
Very
I said,
good.
she's dying. And they said, yes, she's dying. She believes she's alone, but she's not. And God has sent us to be with her and ultimately to help her in the process of transition. And tears are coming down my face. And all of a sudden, my date is looking at me and just saying, "Hello, Tom, are you okay? What the hell is going on with you?" And I said, "Right over there are two angels and this flash of light, and they are helping this woman." And she just turns around and looks, and they were gone. I mean, they're still there because people are walking around, and
Yeah.
I'm saying they are right there. And that was just one of those things that I was able to see
Mm.
for that brief moment, as if my consciousness had shifted. And I remember another experience. I was told a story of my grandfather, the one who married my grandmother, the Native
Yeah.
American woman.
Wisconsin. Yeah.
And during the Great Depression, my great uncle was a Catholic priest and the chancellor of DePere College in Wisconsin. And so he gave his brother, my grandfather, a job as the farm foreman for the college. They grew their own vegetables and food then. And the story goes that they're walking through a town in the Depression, and they pass by this homeless man. And here's the Catholic priest who's just completely oblivious, just whatever.
Yeah.
And the guy asks, "Hey, brother, can you spare some change?" And Father Maurice is just walking oblivious, but my grandfather David looks down and notices the man doesn't have shoes. So they walk into a general store, and my grandfather says to Maurice, "I'll be back in a few minutes." And then he comes back a few minutes later, and Maurice is just blah, 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 blah. And he looks down and says, "David, where are your shoes?" He says, "I gave them to a guy that needed them more than I did because the man didn't have shoes." So in 1993, I'm here in Silicon Valley in Cupertino, California. It's the dot-com revolution. And it's about 5 o'clock. It's 102 degrees out and it's hot. And I look at a crosswalk and I'm on Lawrence Expressway and it's 4 lanes each direction, 8 lane expressway. And there's a man and he's wearing gray flannel trousers, white dress shirt, black leather belt, sharply dressed, sleeves rolled up, wearing um, he's got a nice haircut, but he has a 5 o'clock shadow. And all of a sudden, I look at his feet, and he doesn't have shoes, and his feet are bloody. And I'm looking at this guy saying, what in the hell? I mean, this guy, he just came out of an office building,
Yeah.
Silicon Valley. Why does he not have shoes, and why are his feet bloody? So I'm looking at him, and I look down at my shoes. I said, ah, son of a bitch. And I looked at the stoplight, and I'm thinking it's going to turn green any minute. So I get out the door. I said, hey, buddy, you wouldn't happen to be size 10, would you? And he says, as a matter of fact. Well, what really caught my attention was that just as the crosswalk light had shifted, he stepped on the ground. It's 102 out. So,
Yeah.
the black top is going to be about 185 degrees. And he steps on it. He's just wincing. So that's when I just said, oh, son of a bitch. And I get out and I said, hey, he wouldn't happen to be a 10. And he says, as a matter of fact, I am. The light turns green, and all the cars around me, including in the opposite direction, they're stopped. This guy's in the crosswalk. And lady to my left is looking at me kind of with this look of horror. The guy behind me is just like, no problem. So I say to the guy, I'd come and run them to you, but the light's green. And
Yeah.
I pitch him to him, and he catches him. And he's just walking in front of the cars. And all of a sudden, the pain is gone. His feet aren't touching the ground. He's not touching the ground.
Wow.
And he walks in front of the car. He gets to the other side. And I look up at the light, and I look back. He's gone. He's gone. And when he got the shoes, the last thing that he did is he said, God bless you. And it was as if this energy hit my heart chakra like a water balloon just erupted, and all this love and this energy filled my being. And I think at that point, excuse me, sorry about this. I think that it was about testing my humanity and wanting to make sure that I was paying attention.
Hmm.
And there's this old phrase out of the Bible that I think is often misunderstood. I am reminded of this phrase in the Bible that I think is often misunderstood. And the phrase goes something like, many are called, few are chosen.
Hmm.
Take that, as a friend of mine who was a minister once said, and throw it out the window. The phrase really should be, everyone is called,
We need.
few listen.
Yeah.
And I think right now, what is happening is I believe that right now, more than ever, angels are all around us. I had an experience. The most recent one was a couple of months ago. I was coming out of a hotel. Nowadays, you'll see many homeless, and people give them backpacks, they'll give them clothes, they even give them bicycles. And this guy has a bike, but he's homeless. And I'm at a stop sign again, and hey, buddy, he's not paying attention. Hey, brother. And he comes over, and he's looking at me, and I hold out the window these chocolate muffins. That was going to be my breakfast, but I said,
Yeah.
this guy needs them more than I do. And he comes over, and he's just got this expression, and the light is pouring out of his face. And again, the light turns green. And this is in farm country where country folk don't like to wait.
Yeah.
And, but they're waiting. And he's just there beaming at me. And I said, right. Okay. I get it.
You.
And he says, bless you. And I said, thank you. And he took the muffins and he starts eating one in the middle of the road. I said, you know, it's a green light. He says, they'll wait. And I
Cheeky.
mean, literally with the confidence of God,
Yeah.
they'll wait. Trust me, they'll wait, you know.
Oh,
And
brilliant.
you know, it's interesting because this now for me, I think leads to some experiences that also alien. Um, I have experienced, you know, people say, oh, I mean, I don't know about that. Um, I have seen ships as well.
Oh, wow.
I have quite a lot back in the 1990s. It's very interesting. Uh, I, for some reason, seem to have crossed paths. It's like the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, you know, that game. I have
Yeah.
crossed paths with people who Ram Dass or people somehow, some way it connects to somebody either in ufology or someone in spirituality. And people just say, dude, you're full of shit. And I say, no, I mean, you know, I'm smart, but I'm not that smart that I can make this stuff up and pull it together. I can't do that. But um, I remember an ex-girlfriend, Dr. Jan Bravo. Many people know that name. She was very involved in CSETI with Dr. Richard Greer,
Mm.
and later Emery Smith. And she was one of the people that was very involved in CSETI. And she and I went up to Mount Shasta a couple of times and saw pretty amazing things there. And then after that, it was regularly they would come into my apartment and orbs of light would come in. And one particular day, though, the most profound experience was I was teaching a class on chakras in a metaphysical bookstore. And I'm walking, I was just talking with the owner of the store, and I'm walking down the aisle. And then all of a sudden, you know, had been a park ranger, so I still had the law enforcement training, was pretty hyper vigilant, always looking around. And I just turned this aisle, kind of looked around, no one behind me. And next thing I know, there's a voice from behind me saying, hi, Tom. And I turned around, and this guy is short. And morphologically, the head was the biggest thing on his body, and his shoulders maybe came out about, you know, just an inch or so either
Oh,
side of
wow.
his head.
Yeah.
And his waist was even smaller, like maybe 18, 19 inches.
Yeah.
But he looked just like us. He had blue eyes, sand blonde hair, a little mustache, and glasses. And he was wearing one of these child Levi's shirts, the knit shirts that had the child symbol like you would get in the children's section of the store. He wasn't wearing a man's sized shirt.
Yeah.
And he says, so you're teaching a class on chakras? And I said, yeah. I said, are you taking the class? He says, no. And I asked him, what's your name? And he says, Traveler. I said, that's a strange name. I said, where are you from? He says, I didn't say. And we get into this repartee, and intellectually he's running circles around me. I mean, so I realized something's off and not right because I just can't meet him on the same level without him going up. And I said, at a certain point, could you be any more vague? And he says, absolutely. And so he said, well, you see, you know, he says, so chakras, he says, how many are there? I said, 7. He says, you know, I have only 4. No, you have 7. He says, well, you see auras. Look at my aura.
Oh, you
So
see aura, so he knows this now. Yeah.
he already knew because they're much more advanced than we are. He says, I said, do I have your permission? He says, go ahead. And I look, and he's got 4 chakras. And he says, so what are the colors of my aura? And I said, midnight gray, silver, white. And now the whites of my eyes are showing. And he's just got this little faint upturned smile. And he says, interesting. And he says, what are you thinking? And I said, well, I'm thinking if I didn't know any better, I would say, I'm not talking to someone who's from here. And he smiled and he says, well, I told you I'm not from here. And I said, right.
No.
And I said, where'd you say you're from? And he says, I told you I'm not from here. And so, I mean, clearly this guy was an ET.
Hmm.
And I said, and at that point, the owner said, Tom, you're on in 5. And I said, please stick around. I'd really love to chat with you. And he says, well, I've got to be leaving now. And I said, where are you going? And he says, here and there. And I said, right. And I said, do you think we'll ever meet again? And he said, well, Tom, anything is possible. And that was the one and only time that I had the close encounter of the first kind.
Hmm.
But they can mask their presence with us.
Yeah.
Um, they can look just like us. They can talk to us in our own language. Um, but also that is something that I would say that right now, and strangely enough, I have not had experiences that I'm aware of for 20 years. I mean, there's been a few times where I'll walk by someone and all of a sudden I just say, this person is not from here. And as soon as I get that vibe, they'll look at me and, I just let it go. But it's like they are very aware when we are aware. And, um, but I think right now, more than ever, they are also very much amongst us
Hmm.
and watching us and paying very close attention because this place is a paradise for them. And this place, Mother Earth, is a jewel in the cosmos. And I think they're very interested in our spiritual, our social, our emotional evolution.
Hmm.
And right now, we are on the cusp of, I believe, advancement. But as with all things, we're also at a place where one of the theories that's very prevalent right now is the merging of our third, fourth, and fifth dimensional beings.
Hmm.
And so many are postulating that when this happens again, like the Satya Yuga or the second coming, that this will be an activation that when these third, fourth, and fifth dimensional bodies merge, we will have the gifts that, as Jesus said, as I do, all of you can do,
Hmm.
and greater unto you
Hmm.
go the gifts of God. And I believe that we are rapidly approaching that time and that it is something that we are capable of doing. And many have said that as this change starts to happen, you may notice things around you like poltergeist experiences, and that's basically your fourth or fifth dimensional being kind of communicating with you or resonating around you. I had a recent experience to this effect. I was talking to a friend one night on the phone, and in the office behind me, something caught my eye. And at first, I thought it was a chipmunk or a squirrel that got in the house, and it was a book that had come out of the bookshelf and it was flopping. And then it stopped. I started flopping again, and I'm telling my friend this, and she said, "Go look at the book. Go look at the book title." And so I did, and it was a book of British and American poets. And I said, "Nah, this isn't it." But I had prayed and meditated later, and I heard the voice from within saying, "Go back and look at the book under it on the stack." And sure enough, the book that was out, dog-eared, I pull out, and it was none other than Ram Dass Journeys to Awakening.
Uh,
And I think that that was clearly a message that, you know, my higher self was communicating to me,
yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. Um, so we are in, I think, some very profound times.
I think the signs are just too many from all sides, astrologically, mystically, through, as you say, different voices, whether it's Christian or um, Hinduism or whatever it is. There's
Yeah,
definitely, yeah, we chose to be in this time though,
yeah,
as well. I'm quite interested in our space, in our place in this time, what we came here to do. And I think there's a lot to say around connecting to that inner voice, connecting to those gifts that has got nothing to do with the bank account or the car or the house. There's definitely a depth, which is pronunciated a lot at the moment. And I think more so as we move through, as you say, there are timelines from different places showing us the path. Um,
absolutely.
to be the path is the ultimate connection, I think.
Yeah, it's and my feeling, Michelle, is that the only limitations in our spiritual growth are the limitations that we accept and that we put on ourselves. That um, we can advance as fast and as far as we are capable of going. I think that for me, the decision that I made a couple of years ago about becoming a renunciate to give up a life of materialism and the pursuit of self-aggrandizement to be in service to all. Now, that's not for everybody. That was a choice that I made. And believe me, that choice, it was really scary. And I remember the first 6 months after, this was about a year and a half ago, that when that had happened, um, I had an experience where I had some serious anxiety about it. How the hell am I going to make money? How am I going to pay rent? And, but I had this unwavering faith. And through a confluence of events, circumstances are such that, I find that creator or spirit gives you what you need when you need it, whether it's a roof over your head, a meal in your tummy, money in your bank account. Um, these things happen. And again, more to that point, when I think about this merging of the dimensions, the idea, and this goes into maybe another topic for another time, it's this idea of multiverses, that we can be on the same planet in a different universe in a parallel timeline. So this idea that, people say, well, what happens as people progress and some don't, you know, um, or what's going to happen to the planet if certain parts of the planet decide they want to continue in a warlike way and others consciously evolve. Well, I think of this dimensionality as being, imagine you're in a room filled with people. Say there's 40 people in a room and they're all talking, having a conversation, and you blink your eyes. And the next thing you know, there's 17 of those people in the room, and 23 of them are no longer there. And the 23 that have blinked their eyes are still in the room, still in the same house, still in the same world, same universe, but a different parallel multiverse. And they've noticed those 17 people aren't there. And I think that as what happens with free will, as consciousness progresses, I think that as people continue to evolve spiritually and emotionally, they'll get to a point where they couldn't go back to a density or
Mm.
a more dense consciousness because they've gone too far. Whereas others that may choose to be in a lower um, resonant consciousness will eventually have that opportunity to evolve to that, but they may choose something different. That's where I think free will comes into play and what we choose to perceive, because there are people on this planet who think that it's about materialism and what you accumulate, how much you accumulate, how much you consume.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they're miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are people who I think become awakened to the idea that it's not about how much you consume or how much you eat or how much money you have in your account, but who have you helped? You know, what are you giving? What are you contributing to the planet, to the world? And this is where I think that we have a spiritual obligation and a spiritual duty to be the best that we can be. And, you know, as the old phrase goes, the greatest gift that you can give the world is the gift of your own personal transformation.
Yeah. And it takes the work, you know, there's work that goes into it, and it isn't um just happening for people that choose it. There's a definite choice in what you choose to, you know, where you want to go. To stay where you are is a choice that many people make, and that's fine. That is great for those people. And then, you know, whatever we choose, it is interesting and it is fascinating, and it's a little bit too much sometimes, and you go, oh wow, where did that come
Yeah,
from? You know, and so we progress in what we experience as well,
yeah,
which can be quite mind opening, and you know, especially in this time as we um you know, there's this whole human choosing to be human um, on this earth at this time, and what do we bring with us to this party, because it's an interesting party.
absolutely. And that's the other, I would say, the last thing as far as angelic messages, one of the last messages that I received from Michael, which coincidentally, I believe an archangel can give a message to 100 million people, and 100 million people can get the same message that, strangely enough, may happen for these 100 million people at various times of their lives, if that also makes sense.
Yeah,
Because what is time?
yeah.
But I received a message from Michael that is very much in line with the message that David Wilcock says that he received from Cosmic Disclosure and Cosmic Ascension, his program on Gaiam that is no longer on the air. But the message basically that I received from Michael back in 2021 was, he said at the time when I was kind of reawakened again after hitting rock bottom, he said, you know, you thought that we turned our backs on you. We never did. You chose to turn around and walk away from us. And he said, you know, all the gifts that you had that you thought you lost, you didn't lose those gifts. They're still with you right here and right now. And he said, and very soon, those gifts and far more than you ever imagined are going to be possible. And he said, but know, Tom, that it's the creator that gives you these gifts, and you cannot take credit for that which creator gives you. And then he gave a personal admonishment, which, you know, it's good because angels, they need to kick our ass every now and then, you know, just
Yeah,
because we
see.
have ego. And he said, you know, you'll never get rid of ego. It's hardwired in your DNA. It's what gives you fight or flight response. And he said, you know, um, and don't ever try to be perfect. He says, give up on that because it's not going to happen in your human
Mm.
lifetime. And he said, you know, when you were younger, you were very arrogant, very, you know, conceited. And he said, you're a very intelligent man and you've often lorded your intelligence over other people. And he said, no, Tom, that while it would be great to love everybody, as it's said in the Bible, to love is divine, love God, or love your neighbor as you love God. Um, but he says we know that that's not always possible. So he said, know that when you look into the eyes of another woman and another man, or another man, that you are no greater than and no less than they are, but equal in every way. And that as your abilities continue to progress, there are going to be people that will feel challenged or threatened. And the idea is, don't look at them with a smirk, don't look at them with condescension, but look at them and be absolutely present. Look into their eyes with that complete presence and that empathy and compassion, and it will be disarming to them. And I've thought about that for the last few years, about that message, because it's absolutely true. And to me, it's also scary that you know we see, rather than a world, I mean, again, ever since the solar eclipse, we've had this increase of both these positive and negative energies.
Mm.
And I think that we're also going to see these tremendous positive events and also negative events. But as a species, as animals, we look at the negative more than we do the positive.
Yeah,
And I think also, as a result of that, our world still tends towards division and is divisive rather than being cohesive and coming together. But I think that there is a real paradigm shift that
mm.
is occurring, and that is changing. And
Definitely, definitely,
th-
yeah.
that there will be people that are working together, whether it's sustainability, soil, water, food security, spirituality, to bring about these changes on the planet, climatology, global weather, to create a shift in healing, because it has to happen. And I believe that time is now.
And it can happen if we see each other on the same level as humans instead of as labels or forms or shape or whatever the division causes, because those are all man-made, whether it is, skin color or eye color or men or women or whatever it is. As long as we can see each other, on a soul level, I suppose,
Yeah.
and as human-centered beings, that would
Yes,
be amazing. Tom,
I agree.
thank you so much.
Thanks, Michelle.
I really enjoyed that, and I hope we can do it again.
Absolutely. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you.
Thank
All
you,
right.
you too.
Thanks.